In this lesson, we will be considering the nature of mental stress, how it arises, what its effects are, and how it can be avoided or dealt with. We consider the nature and effects of physical stress, such as extreme temperatures, in Human Performance and Limitations, Part 1, which we call Part 1 for the remainder of the lesson. The reason for treating the topic of mental stress separately from physical stress is that nearly half of adults suffer adverse health effects from mental stress, which is linked to the 6 leading causes of death, namely heart disease, cancer, lung ailments, accidents, cirrhosis of the liver, and suicide. A study in California has shown that people whose lifestyle habits made them less susceptible to stress were shown to have a greater life expectancy than others. In the case of males in their mid-40s, they could expect to live 11 years longer, while women could expect to live 7 years longer. Defining stress is not easy because its causes are so various. If an intruder comes into our home, we get stressed. If we have to make an important decision whether to accept a promotion, we get stressed. If our neighbours play loud music all night, we get stressed. In each of these situations, the cause or stressor is different, though the effect is the same, namely stress. The problem with defining stress is that the common denominator is not the cause but the effects of stress, such as an increased heart rate, higher blood pressure, an increased rate of breathing, sweating, and panic. Consequently, we can define stress as the body's responses to the demands placed upon it. These responses will be different for everyone. Some thrive on a challenge, others do not. Some people will have increased blood pressure when merely having their blood pressure taken, known as the white coat syndrome. Others can hypnotize themselves while major surgery is performed on them. Neither humans nor animals can do without some degree of stress. Left without some amount of stress, animals and people will lose mental acuity and become vegetative. Indeed, it is quite common for people who have worked all their lives and who retire to experience depression and illness as a result of their new inactivity. So, we can say that too little stress causes underperformance. A certain amount of stress is of fundamental importance in keeping us aware and vigilant, whereas too much stress will degrade the performance of both body and mind. When the body has achieved its physiological equilibrium, this is called homeostasis. Stress is cumulative. If a pilot experiences minor irritation or stress, such as an argument at home or bad traffic on the way to work, his stress level will increase disproportionately if another stressor is added later, such as his aircraft having a technical fault before departure. Consequently, a further stressor during the flight, such as working with an inexperienced first officer, may cause an overload of his capacity bucket. The magnitude of a person's response is usually in proportion to the magnitude of the threat. Similarly, the more sudden the threat, the more sudden the response. Real danger will produce an extreme physiological response, known as the fight or flight reaction. For example, heart rate, blood pressure, and adrenaline release will all increase dramatically. Even where the stressors are more everyday and are not life-threatening, such as the approach of a critical deadline, the body will still respond automatically and cause a dry mouth, sweating, anxiety, muscle tension, and tiredness. Conversely, stress levels and the consequent physiological effects will subside quickly when the stressor is no longer present. Stress levels will also be reduced by the successful completion of tasks and by the accumulation of experience in dealing with similar tasks, such as landing in bad weather conditions. It is useful to consider stress by means of a model, which traces the causes of stress and the human response to them. Stress arises not so much from an actual demand upon an individual, as from the demand perceived by the individual. A spider in the bath poses little actual danger, but some people will perceive the spider as a basic primeval danger. Similarly, it is the individual's perceived ability to deal with a stressor, rather than his actual ability, which determines the amount of stress he experiences. So, it is the individual's perception of demand and ability which determines the level of stress. Stress will have a psychological response. An individual may feel depressed or defeated by an exam paper which he repeatedly fails, and this will affect his performance. Similarly, stress will have physiological responses, such as feeling sick, which will also affect performance. Finally, in the model there is a feedback mechanism. This enables the individual's performance to feed back to his perceived ability and his perceived demand of a subsequent similar stressor. One of the features of stress is that an event which causes high stress in one individual may not have the same effect on another. It is also a fact that something which is stressful on one occasion may not be stressful another time. Stress is subjective. Stress can be categorized in various ways. Low stress describes a lack of stimulus, and it can lead to complacency in the cockpit. On a clear sunny day on a cross-country trip, the pilot may be lulled by the low workload into omitting standard checks, such as checking his fuel. Acute stress is the most common, and refers to stressors which have just happened, or may shortly happen. It describes the situations we have looked at in the earlier scenes of this lesson. Chronic stress is relentless. It is continuous, such as the stress caused by long-term financial problems or marital problems. It can lead to serious illnesses and depression, and even suicide. In pilots, chronic stress could be dangerous because it could lead to a resigned attitude of, if it happens, it happens. One can draw an analogy to tiredness and fatigue. Both fatigue and chronic stress can only be cured by solving their root causes. One other type of stress worth mentioning is traumatic stress. This accompanies traumatic events, such as the death of a loved one, battle experience, or a robbery at home. Such events often cause post-traumatic stress disorder, which can be totally numbing, leaving its victim with a sense of detachment from reality and a susceptibility to irrational outbreaks of temper. A person with the disorder requires professional help. Closely related to stress is arousal. Arousal can be described as the measure of a human being's readiness to respond, like a tennis player waiting to receive a fast serve. Whereas stress has been defined as a body's response to the demands put upon it, like the tennis player's actual response to the fast service. Stress and arousal look remarkably similar. Factors in determining arousal levels would include tiredness, skill levels, and the quantity of information being considered. So there is a strong relationship between stress and arousal. The difference is that stress is one factor in arousal, but not vice versa. Indeed, if we look at the chart showing the relationship between stress and performance, we could replace the word stress with arousal without altering the graph. Both stress and arousal are reflected in performance. At low arousal levels, such as just after waking or when suffering from fatigue, the attention mechanism is not very active. Processing of sensory information is slow, and the nervous system is not fully functional. Thus, performance is low, and things may be easily missed. At the optimal arousal level, we are at our most efficient. We have enough demands to keep our attention, and we have the capability to deal with complex tasks, such as landing in poor weather conditions. At high arousal levels, such as when we have reached the limit of our processing capacity, our performance starts to deteriorate. Our attention may become narrowed. We may concentrate on maintaining a correct heading and ignore the fuel gauges, which indicate empty tanks. At very high arousal levels, we experience overload as we reach the limit of our information processing capacity, either because there is too much information, quantitative overload, or we have too few skills to deal with the information, qualitative overload. A further distinction that we need to make is between arousal, the measure of a human being's readiness to respond, and vigilance, which can be defined as the degree of activation of the central nervous system, or how awake you are. It is possible to be fully awake, that is vigilant, but you may not be aroused or focused enough to receive a fast tennis service while you are walking back from the net.